Hello, I am Father Roger Statnick, and I'm the chaplain at Seton Hill University. And I'd like to take the opportunity now to talk to you a little bit about the days that are ahead of us, the days of the Holy Week Triduum. These are the most sacred days of our faith in the Catholic Church. And it's important that we look upon these days, even though this sheltering in place has prevented us from participating in the rituals physically. This gives us an opportunity to reflect upon the meaning of these three holy days: Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter, beginning with the Vigil. You know, in the world that we live in today, a lot of us like to be spectators. Think of all the people that get all excited about watching baseball, football, basketball. But the liturgy is not meant to be a spectator sport. It's meant to be a way in which we enter into the mysteries of life that save us, the action of God with us. And that action is demonstrated through the rituals of the church. And we enter into those rituals and become part of God's action in our lives and our world. There are some key understandings that are necessary for us to be able to realize what is going on in the Holy Week liturgies. The first understanding comes from the Greek word anamnesis. When we translate that into English, it usually is translated as memory, but that's a misunderstanding. It's too thin of an idea. Anamnesis is about entering into the reality that began with Jesus' movement through death and resurrection. Anamnesis is about entering into God's time, which is in fact no time. Anamnesis is about allowing the grace of God to show us a dimension of life that we perhaps take for granted or have never seen before. You know, we live in the past, present, and future. And when we use the word memory, we usually think of some kind of nostalgic event of the past. But when we celebrate the liturgies of the church, it's not about nostalgia about what Jesus did for us. It's rather about entering into what Jesus did once and continues to do now and will do into the future for all humanity. Jesus' death and resurrection is the dynamic that we encounter in every liturgy. And by understanding that what happened on Calvary is somehow unfolding for us still today, not on Calvary, but on Main Street, in our homes, in our cities, in this country and in the world. The mystery of God saving us in death and resurrection is what is displayed for us through the liturgies of the church. We enter into God's time, which is no time or encompasses all time. The point is not to participate in another's life, but rather to live our lives more fully, because now we live them in the God that is seen to be part of our lives. Anamnesis Remembering is about bringing our lives back together, remembering. And the liturgies offer us that opportunity every time we celebrate them. Another important idea in every liturgy, again, is captured by another Greek word, epiklesis. Epiklesis is the word in Greek that refers to calling down the Spirit of God onto this moment. We call upon the Spirit to make real for us the God who is there available to us at every moment of our lives. You might have noticed so often at every Eucharist, when the presider at the altar lifts up his hands and places them over the elements of bread and wine and says, God, Father, send down your Spirit. In fact, at every Eucharist, there's a prayer of calling the Spirit on the elements of the bread and wine, but later there's also a prayer of calling that same Spirit on the people who are assembled there. So that as the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ, so our lives and their relationships are transformed by the Spirit to be Christ's body in our world. It's those two dynamics that are so important to keep in mind as we enter into the holy days of Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter. That we're not just remembering something that happened to Jesus, but we're remembering what happened to Jesus so that we can realize that it's happening still in our lives. Because we are baptized into the death and resurrection of the Lord, as St. Paul says so clearly. That means that what happened to Jesus is now happening to us if we are faithful. And we call upon in every liturgy that Spirit of God to make present now what happened with Jesus and to continue to accompany us as our lives unfold into the future. That is how we participate in the very life of God. And in participating in that very life of God, we realize in our lives the mystery of death and resurrection, the saving reality of God with us. The Holy Week liturgies make that very clear and try to every year invite us to go more deeply into our understanding and our engagement with that mystery of dying and rising. In fact, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter, beginning with the Vigil, is, in a real sense, one liturgy, one act of worship, broken up into three segments. On Holy Thursday, we celebrate the Eucharist. On Good Friday, we don't. Good Friday is the passageway into understanding the Eucharist again on Easter. We go from the Gloria that's sung on Holy Thursday through the silence of solemn Good Friday liturgy. And then we break open again that annunciation of God's victory over sin and death in the Gloria of the Easter Vigil. That movement helps to engage us into the movement of God's Spirit in our lives every day. So, although we may not be able to be physically present for these liturgies, let us take the opportunity to reflect upon them. As we might participate electronically in viewing these celebrations, let us place ourselves in the movement of God and God's Spirit that is there with us no matter where we are. We are entering into very holy days because of what Jesus did for us. We can understand that our lives are part of his action to save us. We are entering into what Jesus did for us so that we might do it for each other. Reflect. Be quiet and careful as you think about the days ahead, and we will know in a new way the Lord's blessing and goodness in our lives.